Americans defaulting on their student loans in a standoff with the federal government. In fact, more than 7 million Americans in default, and many of them just simply ignoring the phone calls, the emails, even those letters from debt collectors. So are taxpayers on the hook for this? The Cato Institute senior fellow, Dan Mitchell. Dan, you know, we see the number now well over $1 trillion. It's gone up extraordinarily since President Obama moved out the so-called middleman. And people, a lot of these folks aren't paying it. Who ultimately does have to pay that?
It's taxpayers who are on the hook. Here's an analogy that I think will make this clear. Remember during the housing bubble, we had these government programs like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac pushing out cheap money and luring people into taking out home loans that ultimately backfired? Well, we now have the government as a predatory lender pushing out these what sound like great loans to people, but those loans in turn are jacking up tuition prices at colleges and universities because they're just special interest groups figuring out how to get more money out of this system. And then these people, you know, the former students are sitting there with a big pile of debt. Oftentimes they didn't get education that actually made economic sense, and now we're left with $1 trillion, and God knows how much of that taxpayers are going to have to swallow. It's the reverse Midas touch of government. Every time they get involved in a sector of the economy, it's bad news.
And yet we knew it was going to happen. You know, it happened right in the shadow of the housing implosion. President Obama pushed everyone out who might have reasonably rejected a poetry degree for $100,000 and said, you know what, you can have it. Rubber stamped them all. Now, though, we hear Hillary Clinton talking about debt-free college and free college for families making up to $120,000. So we're talking about a problem that's already in many minds a ticking time bomb becoming exponentially even worse.
Yeah. Think about it this way. If you're an administrator at a university or a college, you're hearing this rhetoric out of Hillary Clinton, and you're thinking, oh, boy, we'll be able to double our staff. We'll be able to all pay ourselves higher salaries. Some of the worst administrative and bureaucratic bloat in America is at colleges and universities because of all this government intervention, all these government handouts and programs. Now, by the way, I'm not excusing the individuals who took out these loans. You know, just like if you got one of these easy money home mortgages back in 2007, you still should be ultimately responsible. But on the other hand, these people are being victimized by the government giving out free money that winds up being captured by the universities, and the students are left holding the bag. Here's the one reform that would change it. Make the universities and colleges, make them be on the hook if the students don't pay back their loans. I guarantee you those colleges and universities will suddenly focus on what are good careers to train people for.
I love that you brought that up. I've asked the same question. If Harvard's sitting on $45 billion, they can finance these degrees, and if they're great degrees, they'll get paid back, and they'll do something quote-unquote honorable. You know what? At the end of the day, President Obama said folks who took those housing loans, it was no fault of their own, and a lot of these kids think the same thing would be said as they're getting a free pass, maybe, on these. Dan, great stuff. Love the insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, the city